Is it worth it to buy the iPhone 13 Pro Max in 2024? Well, let's talk about it. So, the iPhone 13 Pro Max came out in 2021. So, now it's about 2.5 years old. This phone is still great. In 2024, it still features 120Hz, an OLED panel, the same iPhone design, more or less, than the most recent iPhone, the iPhone 15 Pro Max. It still features a triple camera system, still features an ultra-wide telephoto and main sensor, features lightning, features stainless steel, and a very slim bezels. But this also has some disadvantages, the main being, obviously, the lightning port. So, should you buy the iPhone 13 Pro Max in 2024? And is it obsolete in 2024? So, I will discuss all of that in today's video. Drop a like down below, subscribe to the channel. Thank you guys for watching. Roll the intro. As you know, normally I daily an iPhone 15 Pro Max. This is my main phone, and I love it. Every year I switch to a different iPhone, to a newer iPhone, but one iPhone that has actually touched me, marked me in a way, was the iPhone 13 Pro Max. This phone was so good, was so complete, that I never forgot about it. I think that the jump from the iPhone 12 to the iPhone 13 will be never forgotten in my mind, because this phone was truly remarkable. Yes, some people will say this was a very small jump from the iPhone 12 Pro Max to the iPhone 13 Pro Max, but I disagree. The cameras were way better, especially the display was also amazing. 120Hz totally made the difference. And yeah, this Sierra Blue color was insane. This 6.7-inch display might not have the dynamic island or the smaller bezels like the iPhone 14 Pro Max and 15 Pro Max, but it's still great. No, it doesn't have the newest features on Dynamic Island on the top. The notch is a dead spot. And no, it doesn't have the thinnest of bezels on the iPhone length. But it's still an amazing display. The colors are super accurate, the OLED display is amazing, 1200 nits of peak brightness on HDR video, of course. And if you are coming from an LCD iPhone, you think that this display is the best in the world. Trust me, OLED displays like this, they are still amazing, and you will not notice the difference. Like 99% of people won't notice the difference, at least, between this display and the iPhone 15 Pro Max's display. So, if you were worried about the display, don't. This is still top of the line. So, I do believe that the iPhone 13 Pro Max ended up being way more future-proof than the iPhone 12 Pro Max, specifically because of 120Hz ProMotion technology. But first, let's talk about the design of the iPhone 13 Pro Max. This phone is still very much like the iPhone 15 Pro Max. They are very similar, they still have almost the same design, they have the same camera bump system, they have the overall same look. The only difference is the iPhone 13 Pro Max has these sharp edges, while the iPhone 15 Pro Max has the contoured edges. So they are smoother, they don't feel as sharp, and so the phone feels more comfortable in the hand for long periods of time. Other than that, the iPhone 13 Pro Max design is still very future-proof, and it still looks like the most recent iPhones. So, yeah, if you still have an iPhone 13 Pro Max, you know what I mean. If you are looking to buy an iPhone, the design won't be an issue. This phone won't feel old, it won't feel completely obsolete. No, it will feel just like the iPhone 15 Pro Max with the sharp edges, cutting it a bit more onto your hand, and being a bit heavier also because of the stainless steel instead of the titanium frame. Other than that, feels just like the iPhone 15 Pro Max. And that's not just it. This phone is the same size as the iPhone 15 Pro Max, still has the same 6.7-inch display. The bezels are a bit bigger, and the notch, it's real. It is still here. You don't have the dynamic island present on the iPhone 15 Pro Max, but do you think that dynamic island is enough for you to spend the extra money? Do you think that less weight and the contoured edges are enough? I don't think so. I think that for most people, the iPhone 13 Pro Max, design at least, is still totally worth it, and is still one of the best in 2024. So, as for the design, I don't think this phone is obsolete, and yeah, it's still one of the best in the market. This iPhone was launched in several colors: space gray, silver, forest green, Sierra blue, and I think that was it, and gold. And the ones to get are Sierra blue, if you like this blue, this is the Sierra blue, or at least the forest green, or at least the midnight green. I don't know what was the name. I love that green on the iPhone 13 Pro Max, so beautiful. I wish that I was able to get that, but when I bought the iPhone 13 Pro Max, it only came in Sierra blue and the other colors. The green was launched later, so I bought this blue. This blue is amazing, I love it, it's still very beautiful. I think that the space gray and the silver are boring, and the gold, it's still not that much saturated. But if you want a gold iPhone, still a viable option. In my opinion, the Sierra blue and the green one are the better ones. The one thing that you really need to be very careful, and I want to touch on that on the beginning of today's video, is obviously the Lightning port. This iPhone features the Lightning port, and you need to be very, very careful with that, because the Lightning port currently is on its way out. The EU has forced Apple to switch to USB-C. Again, the iPhone 15 Pro Max does feature USB-C, while the iPhone 13 Pro Max doesn't. And even the iPhone 14 Pro Max still has Lightning. So you need to be very, very careful because, okay, you don't really care about the Lightning port, you still have tons of Lightning cables around, but in about 2-3 years, this port will be completely gone from everywhere. No more companies making Lightning accessories, nothing. Lightning is dead. In the first 2 years, you will not notice that much, but in the next 2, 3, 4 years, and when you are buying this type of iPhone for these prices, you need to think of that. So the only big downside, and probably the biggest deal breaker on this phone, and that could make it not worth it in 2024, is the Lightning port. So if you do really care about USB-C, your only choice is the iPhone 15 Pro Max if you want a Pro phone, or if you want to save some bucks, just buy the iPhone 15. That's an amazing deal, and it still has USB-C. So if you don't really care about the Lightning port or the USB-C, you can keep watching. If you do really care about USB-C and you didn't know that this phone did not have it, it's a deal breaker. Sorry to announce it, guys. And for you, the iPhone 13 Pro Max is not worth it. For the rest of people that don't really care about USB-C, they have Lightning and they are fine with it, let's keep on with the video. This iPhone features a 6.7-inch display. And the display on this phone is amazing. It's really, really good. It's 120 Hz, the first iPhone to feature 120 Hz ever. This was a big jump from the 60 Hz displays from the iPhone 12 Pro Max, and I noticed it a lot. Trust me, still in 2024, this iPhone feels brand new, does not feel slow, does not feel laggy because of the 120 Hz. It makes so much of a difference that I'm risking to say that the processor here doesn't matter. The processor on the 15 Pro Max doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's the A15, the A16, the A17, it doesn't matter. This iPhone's 120 Hz Pro Motion display is really, really good. And the biggest part is, it's a Pro Motion display. What that means is, it's a variable refresh rate display. So it can go from 30 Hz to 120, I think, on this phone. And that's good, because other Android phones that have 120 Hz, they complain that iPhones don't have 120 Hz, the iPhone 15 only has 60 Hz, but their displays is always 120 Hz, wasting battery. While the iPhone 13 Pro Max features a variable refresh rate display. This is really important because this iPhone does not waste battery when it's not using the full capabilities of the display. So when you are scrolling, yes, 120 Hz. When you are watching videos at 30 frames per second, no, 30 frames or 30 Hz. Or when you are stopped watching a page, reading, this iPhone dims down and a lot. I think that the iPhone 14 or at least the 15, they can dim down to 1 Hz, saving lots of battery. I don't think it was on the 13 though. I think this phone can only ramp down to 30 Hz, but still, it's still really good. It still saves you tons of battery. And talking about battery life, the iPhone 13 Pro Max had the best battery life ever on an iPhone. From the iPhone 13 Pro Max onwards, the battery life just got worse. At least with the iPhone 15s, I can say it's a bit comparable to this iPhone, but the iPhone 13 Pro Max was the best battery ever. This was a champ when it was released. Like, this was completely revolutionary. And if you have an iPhone 13 Pro Max, or at least you used an iPhone 13 Pro Max in the last 2 years, you know what I'm talking about. If you are not a power user, easy, 2 days. If you are a power user, day and a half. But still, way more than you actually need. You charge your phone every day, so 1 day and a half, 2 days, it actually doesn't matter. So in 2024, if you find an example with a very good battery health, or at least if you have an iPhone and it still has about 85 upwards, totally fine, this iPhone will have more than enough battery life for you. But going back to the display, again, like I told you, Pro Motion, big thing, but it's also a OLED display and the bezels are super, super thin. These bezels are thinner than the iPhone 12 Pro Max's bezels. These bezels are almost as thin as the iPhone 14 Pro Max's bezels, which are not as thin as the iPhone 15 Pro Max's bezels. So think of this phone as 2 generations behind the iPhone 15 Pro Max in terms of bezel size, but they are completely even, so they don't have that issue with the Android phones. They have very thin bezels at the top, very thick at the bottom. No, this phone has even bezels. They are small. You won't notice, like when you are using the iPhone 13 Pro Max and the 15 Pro Max, you won't notice the difference between the bezel size. Only if you are like a tech guy like me, you will look at, oh, yeah, the bezels are smaller. But if you don't really care about that, this display will feel the same as the 15 Pro Max's display. This iPhone has a peak brightness of 1200 nits, HDR capable, so you are watching HDR video, it will go up to 1200 nits. The iPhone 15 Pro Max can go up to 2000 nits. Outside, it's different. You can notice the difference between the brightness on these displays. But inside, you won't. And that's where I reach the point of, if you want to buy a new iPhone, it's really expensive. The 15 Pro Max costs you $1,100, $1,200, while the 13 Pro Max, you can get it for $750. It's not half the price, but it's almost half the price. And 800 nits more. USB-C, that's a deal breaker that I talked about earlier, but still, if you don't really care about that. Titanium. All of these things are not big things, are not important for most people. What is important is the camera, battery life, and display. And this phone ticks all the boxes. Again, the display, 6.7-inch ProMotion capable display. The hardware is insane. Stainless steel, glass on the back, feels super premium. The battery life is incredible. 1 day, 1 day and a half, easy. So, is there any more deal breakers like the camera? No, the camera is no deal breaker. The camera on this phone is really good. It's a triple camera system. Although it doesn't feature the 48 megapixel sensor present on the iPhone 15 Pro Max and 14 Pro Max, this 12 megapixel main sensor from the iPhone 13 Pro Max is still really good. This was at the time a revolutionary camera upgrade because of the low light capabilities that it added. The 12 Pro Max had good low light capabilities. The 13 Pro Max had amazing low light capabilities. The video here is also great. It can record at 4K, 60 frames per second, and this was the first iPhone to introduce cinematic mode. You are limited to 1080p at 30 frames per second, and you can also record ProRes. This iPhone has almost every feature from the most recent camera iPhones. So, yeah, what I gotta say, you don't have 4K, 30 frames per second at cinematic mode. Maybe that's a deal breaker for you. Maybe it isn't. And you definitely don't have the Apple Lock capabilities of the iPhone 15 Pro Max. But that's not big for you, then it doesn't matter. This camera on this iPhone is really good for social media, for taking photos of your family, everything. It's still an amazing camera. The telephoto, it's a 3x telephoto, can zoom in very far away, can take amazing portrait shots. The ultra wide here, not as good as the 15 Pro Max, but not terrible, can take good shots, way better than the 12 Pro Max. And the main sensor is really good. It has really good HDR, the photos look realistic, the colors are great. Everything is good. Like, this camera at that time was the best camera in 2021, at least in 2021. In 2022, the iPhone 14 Pro Max had a better camera. The 48 megapixel sensor was a huge jump over the main sensor. And now with 15 Pro Max, the video capabilities got way better. But the 13 Pro Max in 2024 is still like 90% or 85% the camera of the 15 Pro Max. The only difference being the 40 megapixel sensor, Apple Lock, and 4K cinematic mode, and obviously the 5x telephoto. So that's something you need to analyze. If you don't need those features, the 13 Pro Max camera will be just enough for you. As for the speakers, well, instead of me talking about that, I think I need to show you a comparison and then you will decide. Take a listen. All in all, this phone is still great. This was launched in 2021, and 2.5 years later, is still a battery champ, still has an amazing display, still has an amazing triple camera system, the body is still very comfortable, super premium to feel, stainless steel just makes this iPhone totally worth it. It will be worth the $700 that it will cost you. If you can find a good example on eBay or wherever you want to buy it, a third party used, this iPhone will feel very complete. Now, if you have decided to buy this iPhone, there are several options. Go for a used market or refurbished market. Be very careful on those two. But this phone sells around for around $700 to $750 on the refurbished market and around $650 to $700 on the third-party market. You need to decide if it's worth it to have the certification of a company or if you are willing to risk having no guarantee and buying from a third party. If you are buying a used iPhone from other companies or stores, you need to be very careful when you are watching the grade of the phone, if it's a grade A, grade B, grade C, and especially the battery health on that phone. But if you are buying from anyone outside a company, like a third party, and you are buying it used, always ask or always check the battery health of the phone. Just go into settings, battery health, and check. If it is below 80%, do not buy it. It's not good enough. And the battery life, you will need to replace the battery later. It will cost you around $100. It's expensive. Don't do it. But if it is above 85% and it's a good deal, go for it. The iPhone 13 Pro Max is still an amazing option, and it's totally worth it in 2024. Below this phone, I would say is getting it close. The iPhone 12 Pro Max, I don't know. I will have a video on that later on the channel. So if you are excited for that, drop a like down below and subscribe to the channel. But as for the iPhone 13 Pro Max, totally worth it. If you want one and you have a good deal, go for it. Thank you guys for watching. This is me, Tech Smart, talking to you here. Bye-bye.